Hello everyone, it's my opinion or impressions of the Daniel Hertz Maria 800 with the Chiara speakers. We've done quite a few Daniel Hertz reviews already, so Mike will put those in the description. I'll just do a quick overview for those of you who are new to this brand. Daniel Hertz was started by Mark Levinson, the man. Many of you will have heard of the brand Mark Levinson. He started the company back around 1974 and very quickly became known for manufacturing the highest level of quality of products in its day. And in fact, to this day, some of the technology is still considered very, very good. So much so that many of the early Levinson products are still highly sought after by collectors, especially in mint condition. Mark started really his career as a professional musician. He loved jazz and used to sit in with jazz greats, Stan Getz, and I just on and just could go through a whole list, Sonny Rollins and so on. And then decided that he wanted to really play classical Indian music, and on his way to India, he stopped in Switzerland and visited a company called Stellavox and was stunned by how incredible this company was, how high the quality of manufacture was, and he's even said in interviews that there was a spiritual element to the company that he found extremely intriguing, and realized that perhaps that was his way of translating music reproduced by great musicians to a much wider audience than he could as a professional musician. So he came back to the US, started Mark Levinson, the company, and started the legend. Anyway, fast forward, started the company, Daniel Hertz, I think around late 2000s. And at the time he was manufacturing, let's call it traditional electronics, in the sense that they're big, they're bulky, they produce heat, just like everybody else. His speakers, interestingly enough, the M1, for example, that he introduced back then, is still very much the same product as he continues to offer. Sometime along that journey, he realized that perhaps the best way to take the next step change in electronics is to manufacture it in a computer chip. Started working on a software suite, which he now calls Mighty Cat. It's embedded in a computer processor, and the Mighty Cat basically houses all these different features, which I'm going to go through very quickly. There's a technology called C-Wave, which he just got a patent on, which he claims to make digital sound like analog master tapes. Now, I want to underline this a little bit. Our industry is full of wonderful engineers, very, very good, talented engineers. You can name off all these different brands: NAD, Cambridge Audio, D'Agostino, Macintosh, and so on. They're all, there's a lot of very, very good, competent engineers. Less of those engineers are also involved in the recording end of it. So in other words, while they might be great at designing products that can play back a recording, obviously only a small proportion of those engineers have ever been involved in the actual, on the recording side. And even fewer of those have ever played professionally. Mark is one of the very, very, very few that has been involved from the very start of the chain. In other words, he's played professionally. He's also been involved in the recording chain, and then he manufactures products that reproduce them. So he's intimately familiar with every aspect of it. And so when digital first came about, it bothered him that it didn't sound quite right. And he's been working all this time, and he believes that C-Wave technology now brings digital signals and makes them sound like what his analog master tapes sound like. So that's C-Wave. Also built into the Mighty Cat software is the ability to do programmable active crossover technology. So in the case of the Chiara, there's no crossover parts inside the speaker. All of the crossover is done inside the C-Wave. So whether it's the crossover point, the slope, the gain, the levels, and also the time alignment, all of this is done within programming inside the Mighty Cat suite. All the digital conversion is also done in the Mighty Cat suite as well. So any digital signal that comes in gets converted to analog. The ability to fine-tune the speakers, if you buy the Maria integrated amplifier, there's two versions, by the way, the Maria 350, which is the 2-channel version, and the Maria 800, which is the 4-channel version. If you buy the Maria 350 integrated amplifier for a pair of speakers that you own, let's say it's a Focal or B&W or Wilson Audio, whatever the case is, Borenson, you can contact Daniel Hertz and they can, via TeamViewer, remotely adjust the integrated amplifier to your particular environment and taste such that you get the results that is an optimized sound for your ears and your listening environment, something that is very unique to Daniel Hertz. There's a headphone amplifier built within the Daniel Hertz Maria, and it's also tunable, so that this way, again, it can be optimized for your set of headphones. The integrated amplifier is also a modular design, so if you were to take the top off, you will see all these different boards. And if in the future upgrades to these boards are available, they can just be swapped out. And then finally, there's a USB port on the back so that it allows for the factory to give you updated firmware if that becomes available. And then finally, everything is manufactured by hand in Venice, Italy. One thing to also say is that the Maria is a one-box solution. Inside the box, basically, it replaces your preamplifier, your amplifier, your DAC, and headphone amplifier, and also all these cables. So what's very compelling about it, for me anyway, is that it's a compact, lightweight, relatively low heat, takes up very little real estate, and yet it performs at a very, very high level. I mentioned earlier that I've done a bunch of videos on Daniel Hertz. A couple of the videos included a shootout of our top integrated amplifiers. And again, Mike, if you can link those videos in the description, you can watch those videos and see what I thought. Okay, let's talk about the sound. For me, it's a real chameleon in the sense that it's quite neutral. It reproduces whatever you put in front of it. Now, of course, lots of systems do that. But what's interesting is that this is the first time I was extremely aware of that. Let me explain what I mean. We received the Chiara and Maria 800s just before we were going to participate at the 2024 Montreal Audio Fest. This was back in March. I had spoken with Mark and said, why don't we do the show? And he says, great. And he ships us these items, and they arrived a few days just before the show. So it was cold in the sense that we didn't have a lot of time to familiarize ourselves with the system. So, of course, immediately we unboxed everything, hooked everything up, and tested everything to get an idea of what was going on, to burn everything in as well. And I remember as we were trying different configurations, sources, cabling, setups, and so on, different music, I was very aware that the speakers were just reproducing whatever I put in front of it. Other systems certainly do the same thing, but not at the hyper-awareness that I was subjected to, but in a good way. I could very quickly hear that if I were to use this streamer versus this other streamer, the difference was very, very obvious to me. When I tried different power cables, yes, power cables make a difference. I could hear that the shunyata that I ended up choosing sounded far better than other power cables that I was trying, and so I ended up using the shunyata. We tried a bunch of different power conditioners because obviously being in a hotel room for the show, I wanted to make sure our power was as good as it could be. And again, we tried a whole bunch of different power conditioners. I ended up with the shunyata, again, because it seemed to sound the best, and it was very clear to me that with this system, it sounded best with the shunyata. The choice of music that I selected for the playlist, it was fascinating to hear how to notice what my reaction was like to music that I know really, really well. I wanted to make sure that the playlist included music that I knew really well, so that if there was a problem at the show, I would be able to hopefully address it. Well, as I was playing and shortlisting the music, I was hyper aware that, oh wow, I'm hearing things I didn't quite notice before. It was there, yes, I noticed it, but it was in the forefront of my brain. And then to notice how I felt as I played incredibly inspired music. And I think that was the time that I started to really think about inspired music, so to speak. I'll get to that in a moment. The one thing I will say, to get the best out of these speakers, you do have to play with setup a little bit in terms of the speakers. Not a whole lot. They don't require micromanagements of the setup and so on. They do like you to sit at least 8 feet away. If you sit too close, it doesn't quite gel. The tweeters are set up relatively high. So if you're in a normal chair, you'll be sitting slightly below the tweeter level. So I noticed that if I sit at least 8 feet away, I hear the high frequencies and the airiness and so on. If I sit closer, then I want to be on a higher chair. If I sit further back, it's no problem at all. And again, this was borne out at the show when we started setting up, and I put my first level of seats initially 6 feet away. It was fine, but when at the 8-foot level, it sounded great. And so anyway, something to be aware of. So let's come to the actual show itself. At the Montreal show, my playlist included about 20 tracks of music. Out of the 20, 3 were test tracks in the sense that they would do certain things to showcase the sound of the speakers. So the first track that I played for every presentation was roughly about 20, 25 minutes long. The first track was a 30 hertz note. Now, why 30 hertz? Well, Daniel Hertz claims that the speakers are capable of going down below 30 hertz and over 20,000 cycles. And so I wanted to prove that that was the case. When I played the 30 hertz test tone, I specifically asked everybody in the room, and typically there were about 10 to 12 people in each session, if they heard and felt that bass, and everybody, every single time said yes. They were stunned that this tiny little speaker could produce prodigious amounts of 30 hertz bass notes. And then we would play other cuts of music from that point on. So full range, and not only full range, but full range with power and conviction. And then the other thing also was that the bass changed its character depending on the kind of music you played. It could be warm and slow and a little bit fuzzy, depending on the recording, and then suddenly be slap tight and punchy and visceral when the recording called for it. I'll give you a couple of examples of music. So one of the pieces I chose for the playlist was the Flight of the Cosmic Hippo by Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, right? So right at the start of the piece, a lot of you audiophiles will know what I'm talking about. You'll be nodding yes. Right at the very start, you have this bass note that goes boom, boom, very slow and lumbering, just like a hippopotamus when it's walking around. This has got this very slow, rumbly kind of walk. And then you hear the banjo start plucking, and it's a completely different tone, different speed, different transients, and the contrast is wonderful. And then I would play Gary Carr, Adagio di Albinioni. And again, old-time audiophiles may know this album. It's a fantastic album. It was recorded in 1981 at the Vega Hall in Japan. Harmon Lewis plays the pipe organ. Gary Carr plays his contrabass. Now, I met Gary Carr a number of years ago at the CES. I've been a big fan of his for years. So when I saw him in the hallway, I never do this. I literally never, I went up to him. I said, Mr. Carr, I'm such a huge fan. I shook his hand, even if he didn't want to. I grabbed his hand, shook it. And he was such a delightful man. He says, oh, that's so nice. He asked me some questions about what I liked. And I told him, I said, my first exposure to you was this particular album. And ever since then, I have listened to it hundreds of times. I played it for audiophiles everywhere, and they've all fallen in love. I said, as a matter of fact, I would like to take credit for having sold tons of your albums because I've played it so much. If you've never heard this, please do yourself a favor, try to buy it. You will be blown away. Unfortunately, it's not available through streaming. Anyway, about 2 minutes into the song, he plays these very deep, low notes. And he's got his bow, and it's just going slowly across the strings. And you could almost count the cycles as they vibrate. It's insane. And they shake right through your body. This is the contrabass. And by the way, contrabass has an interesting story behind it. This contrabass was donated to him by Serge Koussevitzky's widow when he passed away, because they were friends. And it's an instrument made by Amati back in the, I guess, the 1700s. So that was the instrument he was playing. And the sound of that instrument is just to die for, just truly magnificent. So when you listen to that bass rendition compared to Flight of the Cosmic Hippo, it's completely different. Remember what I said earlier about how it's a chameleon and makes you hyper aware of these differences? That's what the system does. It does it so well. But at no point does it do it at the expense of the musicality. And this is something I'm going to come back to a little bit later, the importance of musicality as far as this system is concerned. Let's talk about the mid-range. The one thing that I love about these speakers in the mid-range is this incredible speed and transient response. It reminds me of the best that Martin Logan does, the electrostatic portion, that speed, that transient response, the immediacy, but also at the same time with a warmth and body that sometimes electrostatics miss. It has that. It has that ability to do the start and stop, but also has that richness in the harmonics that makes it very believable and very real. When you listen to, for example, Chopinesque by Jean-Baptiste, when I played this recording at the Montreal Fest, people were stunned at how real the piano sounded in this bedroom in the hotel, roughly 13, 14 feet wide by about 20 feet long. You can instantly hear when he hammers on the keys, the immediate attack of the hammers on the strings, that transient is explosive. And then the richness of the sound of the wood, of the piano reverberating. It's just something you've got to hear. It's just absolutely stunning. And then on the other side of it, the 23rd Psalm recited by Shane Cottrell and then Mark Levinson playing the Chinese temple bells. This is a recording that Mark did, I want to say back in the 2000s. And what's interesting is this is a completely different scale. Shane Cottrell is, I guess, his ex-wife's mother. And Mark had asked her to recite the 23rd Psalm. For those of you who know, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And you can hear her voice, and I don't know if it's just me or imagining it, but she sounds a little bit tentative, maybe a little bit shy because she's not necessarily a professional in front of a microphone. And then Mark very carefully and beautifully compliments her reciting of this beautiful psalm. He'll gently tap on the temple bells and every so often allow it to play a little bit louder and lets the reverberation go longer. and at the very, very end, he taps on it harder, and then the bell just goes on and on and on and on. And what's beautiful is to notice how real those bells sound. I grew up in a village, and right across the street from me was a Buddhist temple. And every day of my life up until I was 17, I heard those bells. And when I heard the bells that Mark recorded, it just took me back to those times, and it was fascinating how I was able to relate and immediately have this deja vu experience. And then let's talk about the highs. The high frequencies are reproduced by, appears to be a ribbon tweeter. Mark calls it air restriction. I assume it's some form of ribbon. It's as good as it gets. Very extended, airy, clear, articulate. The ambience is literally dripping, never ever harsh. The one thing that I find very difficult as I get older is the reproduction of high frequencies, especially when it sounds harsh and hard on every track I listen to. That just drives me crazy. A few days ago, I was visiting a friend, and he had just bought these speakers. I won't mention what. He had asked me to come and help him because it just wasn't sounding right. So I went to visit him, and it's a well-known brand name. You all know it. And oh my God, it was harsh. I mean, the crazy thing is this. Within the first few seconds, it was wonderful. The first impressions were, wow, magnificent, clarity, speed. And after about a minute, I wanted to claw my eyes out. It was terrible. And that's why he was calling me. What can we do? So we started adjusting the speakers back and forth, flat, towing out a little bit more, towed in at extreme angles, moving them away from the walls, did everything we could, and finally left it as much as we could doing this. And then I told him get a whole bunch of room treatment to help out, although his room was fairly well treated. It's just going to do more because he just bought these speakers. He's not going to get rid of them. Metal dome tweeters tend to do a lot of that to me, whether it's pure metal dome or a beryllium version or whatever it is. Even some ceramic dome tweeters, they tend to do that. What's fascinating is that ribbons, at least in this case, they don't do that, and neither are they sibilant. Sometimes ribbon tweeters can sound a bit sibilant, not with these. I just absolutely love the ribbon part of it. Sound staging and imaging. They throw a very believable wide sound stage, if your room allows it, and very, very deep. At the show, we had the speakers roughly 5 feet from the front of the speakers to the wall behind the speakers, and in the money seat, as they call it, the depth can be scary good. I asked throughout the presentations a couple of pieces of music that I would play, what do you guys think? And people would oftentimes say, boy, that back sounded like it was all the way past the front wall. So they certainly throw a very, very wonderful, believable sound stage. And images are tall as opposed to short. They're also not pinpoint, which I generally don't like. They have some believable size and dimension. So certainly they'll do all the audiophile stuff that we as audiophiles like. So there's nothing to really nitpick at, but I will get to that a little bit later. How about dynamics? Probably the most dynamic sound I've ever played out of a small speaker like this. Now, a large part of it has to do with the fact that the woofer, according to Mark, has a resonant frequency of 27 hertz, which means that the woofer, the free air, will go down to 27 hertz, and in the cabinet will go below. And they can play loud. Mark specifies the speakers at up to a maximum sound pressure level of 120 dB. That's loud. 120 dB is very, very loud. And at the show, we a few times did in fact play it very loud. And a lot of the reason that it can do that is because of the Maria 800. I mentioned earlier, well, maybe I didn't. The Maria 800 is a 4-channel amplifier. So each channel puts out rated 350 watts into 8 ohms, 500 to 4. Mark says they can actually put out quite a bit more than that. So what you've got is one channel for the bass, one channel for the tweeter, another channel for the bass, another channel for the tweeter. So that's why you have 4 channels. And because you have 4 channels of dedicated power for each woofer and each tweeter, there is no sharing. There is no lack of power. It can produce all the dynamics you want. And so from the softest of the notes to the loudest of the notes and everything in between, it seems to be able to do that with no difficulty at all. And that is important. Sometimes I wonder, why is it that reproduced music doesn't sound like the real thing? I'm sure some of you have thought about that as well. And I believe that to sound believable, there are certain things that must be there. And one of them is unfettered dynamics. If the speakers always sound compressed, it'll never sound real. This is now summer. Last Saturday, I believe it was, I had to go downtown to visit a client. And as I'm walking from my parked car to his condo, along the way, you could hear street musicians playing music. So I stopped. And as I'm listening, I'm not marveling at how highs the sound, how clear the highs are. In fact, they sounded a bit dull in open air. But as they were playing drums, I felt the dynamics. It was insane how much air the trumpet was moving. It was unbelievable. And so dynamics and the ability to move air, those are some key ingredients that you absolutely need. One other thing I want to mention about the playlist for the Montreal show, as I mentioned earlier, I had 3 test cuts, and then the rest were all music. The reason I chose this proportion was because I wanted to play music. I wanted to share the experience that I had discovered while breaking the system in, that there was this sort of quality of magic that I found so inspiring. When I played music that was inspired, I would get goosebumps, or I would get the message of the music, or I would get drawn into the music because somehow special musicians on a special day that were somehow motivated extra delivered this incredible performance that was captured, and then when you play it back on the right system, you get just absolutely pulled in. So these are some of the recordings that I shortlisted. Mother Nature's Son by Paul McCartney from the Anthology 3 album. No Woman, No Cry by Bob Marley, live at the Lyceum. Joni Mitchell, both sides now, the original and the 2000 version. Mahler Symphony No. 5, Adagietto. The debut of the Simon and Garfunkel Bridge Over Troubled Water, live 1969 at Carnegie Hall. Harry Belafonte, live at Carnegie Hall, Man Smart, Woman Smarter. I'm mentioning these for a specific reason. I would do a quick intro about the song, and then I would play it. So explain the song a little bit, and I'd play it. And I noticed at almost every session, I saw people reacting very emotionally. And a few times people actually had tears. When I played Harry Belafonte's Man Smart, Woman Smarter, we had people laughing and smiling when they listened to the lyrics. In 3 sessions, at the end of the session, I had people standing up and clapping. I didn't say this was the end of it. I just basically turned the volume down and people would stand up and clap because they were so involved in the playback. What does this mean? When was the last time you stood up and clapped when you're listening to your music? Well, I saw this with strangers at a show in a room that we had no control over. That is the magical quality that this system can do. If there's inspired music, if there's inspired magic in the recording. So then the question becomes, does C-Wave really work? Now remember, what is C-Wave? Mark says C-Wave is their technology that takes digital and makes it sound like great analog master tape. And it also removes the stress of listening to digital. Does it work? Well, by the reactions that I saw at the Montreal Hi-Fi show, it certainly does. The other thing that's also interesting is that recently, Mark was kind enough to do Zoom presentations for invited guests. We did, I think, 4 presentations. And out of the playlist, I think we had about 6 songs per session, because unfortunately each presentation was only about 45, 50 minutes long. Out of the 6 songs, 3 of them were YouTube concerts. Yeah, Mike? 3 of them were YouTube concerts. Now this is interesting. Over the years, I've certainly watched my share of YouTube concerts through hi-fi systems, and while they're always more interesting to watch because you've got visuals as well as the sound, it was completely different through this system. Somehow, it was much more involving. And we weren't playing anything special in terms of recording. This is YouTube, highly compressed. And yet it was so interesting, so much so that every attendee commented very specifically about the YouTube portion. I mean, everybody expected great recordings to sound great. Nobody expected YouTube to sound great, and yet it did. So maybe by that metric, C-Wave seems to work. Ultimately, that is the essence of the Maria 800 Chiara system. It plays magic when it's in the recording. It plays music from the perspective of a designer who plays music to this day. Because he is in an unusual circumstance where he knows live music really well, he has recorded music for a long part of his life, and he's also been involved in the creating of electronics and speakers to reproduce music. He knows intimately what each chain can do, and he's always trying to do more, if you will, do better. And maybe that's why the Maria 800 and the Chiara system succeeds so well. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. I wish it was more affordable. I wish the volume control was remote. None of these things are necessarily deal breakers for those of you who can afford the system. And as far as the remote control is concerned, if you're using Roon or using Cobas and so on, there's the streamers have volume controls, and otherwise just go up to the volume control and adjust it. It's not that big a deal. Are there areas of performance I would like to see more of? Yeah. There are times I like to play very large-scale orchestral music. And at high levels, when I'm by myself, I really like to crank. And whether the speakers can do it or not, I never feel like I want to turn it up that loud, because I just don't want to take the chance of damaging them. Maybe they can play very loud. I remember Mark said to me, when you go to the show, crank it up. Don't worry about it. Turn it up. And although we did, I never, ever wanted to go past 11. On some of the systems that we have in the store, I will go past 11. The guys will tell you that. And maybe it's just a subconscious thing in me, but within the volume level that I play, I can't say that I've been disappointed with the dynamics. I'm struggling to think of any real negative sonically, and I can't really say that I have. Anyway, let's get to the good, bad, and ugly portion. All right, so this will be the summary. Good. It is ultimately designed as a complete system. Mark has taken out all the guesswork. He's supplying you with electronics in a box. It's light, compact, relatively cool, easy to use. Everything is built in. You don't need to buy a separate preamp or an amplifier or cabling or a DAC or anything like that. And the electronics are optimized with the speakers in mind. So everything's already done. All you have to do is take them home, plug them in, and enjoy your system. Factory support is fantastic. I can tell you that from personal experience. Mark will answer the phones, answer the emails, answer your questions, help you optimize anything that you need to optimize. If you would buy, for example, the Maria, as I said earlier, the integrated amp, and you have a different pair of speakers, they'll help you optimize the system. Pride of ownership. You are buying something that is created by artisans by hand in Venice, Italy. Everything is made in Italy. Everything is designed by a small group of people who truly care about giving you the very best that they know how. The enclosure, for example, of the cabinets, of the speakers or the amplifier are hand rubbed and hand polished. The volume controls are made of stainless steel that's mirror polished to this degree that is startling. And the contrast between the black enclosure and the mirror polished stainless steel knobs reminds me, I think I've said this before, of a classy watch like the Patek Philippe Calatrava. It's just so understated in its elegance and luxury. I really love it. It is not mass produced. Everything is made to order. When you order something, they manufacture it to your order. So this is made specifically for you. It can reproduce musical magic even from YouTube, something very unique. I can't say that I've experienced this before, except with the Maria system with the Chiara. You very rarely see any Daniel Hertz on the used market. Maybe from the early production, very, very early on, once in a blue moon, you might see something, but you rarely see Daniel Hertz products on the used market. That generally means that people are very happy and they buy it and they keep it. And that means that you are off the merry-go-round of upgrades. So, bad. There's no denying. It's a lot of money. It's what is it, 60,000? Sorry, I forgot to mention. It's 59,999 euro, so 60,000 euro, or 64,825 US dollars. So it's a lot of money. It's not chump change, and I don't ever want to minimize that. However, do note this. Many of you watching this video will have a system that costs way more than that. You have cables that cost a portion, a good portion of this amount. I know that because I know many of you, and you guys write to me. Cables, just cables alone cost that much, and this is the entire system. The other thing also to note is that if you were to separate the Maria integrated amplifier into its components, you've got a preamp section, you've got a power amp section, you were to buy a DAC, you had to buy 4 channels of power amplifier. What would that cost? Especially when you consider how good every section is. As I mentioned before, I did a shootout of top-of-the-line integrated amplifiers, 5 or 6 of them. And at that point, my conclusion was the Maria 2-channel version was my choice for being the best overall. That's how good it is. So as a complete system, it's a lot of money for sure. But when you break it up into its constituent components, it's a lot more competitive than you might think. There's lots of competition, for sure. That's another bad. It's not like it's the only thing out there. There's lots of competition. You could buy speakers from Wilson Audio, Focal, Borison, which is the current flavor, Bowers & Wilkins, all kinds of wonderful speakers. But then you'd have to buy electronics that may or may not match. And you might buy it and you go, wow, that sounds pretty good, but it's not what I remember. And then you start on the merry-go-round again. So although that's true, lots of competition, the Maria system with the Chiara is optimized. This one is interesting. It's not a He-Man system. When you spend 65,000 US dollars, a lot of people expect to see big heat sinks, big knobs, and weighs as much as you do, and the speakers are big and hefty, and they look like you spent a lot of money. This system will not do that for you. If that's important to you, you're going to take a pass on this. Another unknown is resale value. Absolutely. I'm not going to hide from the fact that we have no clue what the resale value is because this is all new. And Daniel Hertz, although the company is not new, is not, maybe on purpose, a well-known quantity in terms of branding. Mark, when he started Daniel Hertz, realized that what he was trying to achieve was perhaps a lot different than what he was trying to achieve with cello and with Mark Levinson and so on. He had decided that he wanted to have a company that remains relatively small, under his control, making really, really fine products for small, specific individuals as opposed to everybody. And so maybe that is going to be an issue. No remote. As I mentioned, there's no volume control, and that might be an issue for you. It's not for me. I get used to the fact that I can adjust the volume either with my streamer or just getting up and just turning the volume. It's not that big a deal. Your audiophile friends will not be impressed. Sure enough, they come over saying, oh, you just bought a $65,000 system, and they come over and they expect everything. And they see this, and they go, maybe this is not what it is. True enough, right? Here's a practical concern. Black perspex. Black anything will show dust and scratch. So you got to be careful if you buy this. And then finally, as a negative, although to me this is a positive, you cannot mix and match. I know audiophiles among you will go, yeah, well, I want to be able to use this preamp with that amplifier, and that's, you can't do that with this. This is a complete system. But then again, it's like buying a Ferrari. Do you really want to then buy a Ferrari and start putting in Joe Schmo's suspension system along with this other thing and that other thing? I don't know. Ferraristas generally frown on things like this. Now, maybe there are others among you that go, no, that's me. I want to do that. Well, in this case, this is not the right product for you. Ugly, in my opinion, just look at all the points I mentioned for bad. It's basically the same for ugly. I can't think of anything really, really, really bad as far as that goes. So I would say ugly would be just as bad. Ugly would be bad. Conclusion. This system is basically for the person who wants an optimized system. When you spend the money, you want to know that this is exactly what you're going to get optimized. You don't want to have any chances that it will be worse substantially or not than what you paid for. And many of you will know what I'm talking about. You've bought enough audio gear, you've upgraded enough times to know you buy it and then you have regret. This is optimized. There won't be any question that it is not what it's supposed to be. So this is for somebody who wants a system that's optimized, easy to use, compact, designed by a musician who knows what real music, what real instruments sound like, and he uses that as his reference. It can be an end game system, especially if you're tired of the upgrade, the merry-go-round of changing. You want it something that's small, that won't take up a lot of real estate, that's perfect for a condo or a larger space than a condo, a living room that you can connect the TV to so you can enjoy movies and music, or a dedicated audio system, a room, I should say. You appreciate artisanship. It's not just how heavy something is, but you appreciate handmade quality products that takes longer than a typical product would take. You appreciate that it is actually made for you. This is not something that if you called me, I would have something in stock. I would actually have to contact Daniel Hertz or whoever your dealer is, and it takes 4 to 6 weeks. It takes that long. And finally, you enjoy being different. You don't just want to buy another Rolex, you have one. You don't want to be another Rolex crowd. You want to be the Ulysse Nardin, the guy who wears the freak, for my watch lover friend over there. You want that, I don't know, you want that something, the Adawak, that something unusual watch that nobody knows what it is. And they look and you go, what is that? Or you want that MBNF, something that is made by hand by a group of artisans who really care about their work, and something that is so unique and made specifically for you. That's who you are. So anyway, as I said, this is a long video, but I thought I should do it because there's so much in my mind about this, and I wanted to share it with you. So thanks for watching. Thanks for plodding through this. If you've heard this system, please let me know what you think. If you haven't heard it, try to get some time to go listen to it and then tell me what you think. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.